Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today we're closing out the character rebalancing reviews by looking at the universal class, the smallest and also I think the most well-rounded. This class has the fewest number of weak or characters that need rebalancing. However, there are a few standouts that definitely need help. Now please keep in mind that of course all of the characters that I've tier 2'd, or at least most of them, don't need any help. Also keep in mind that the Universal class is a bit skewed because it has so many native tier 2s. All of the Black Order, plus Thanos, plus Dormammu, and Odin. So because of that, there's really not that many native tier 1 characters that we can really judge on the same level as we've been doing for the Blast Speed and Combat class. But jumping right in, first off the bat, Medusa, Queen of Attilan with Black Bolt. Great character, actually doesn't need any changes. She's got a good immunity on her 3rd skill that's helpful for new players. She's got multiple iframes, good leadership, good tier 2 passive, solid all around. Hela, on the other hand, could definitely use some help. Despite having some interesting skills with debuff, with resistance down, with summoning clones, and with a very strong leadership, she struggles to deal damage on her own, and she also more appropriately struggles to not take damage and to not die. Even though she has guaranteed dodge 25%, it's not enough. She has too many partial iframes, and she doesn't deal enough damage on her own without help to really be enough of an impact. So I definitely would like to see a uniform for Hela, maybe one to coincide with Ragnarok, the new movie. I would like to see some of her skills changed around to do more damage. They could boost her illusions to have a higher percentage of her skills, maybe 120% instead of 70. But I think she does need a little bit of love to be where she should be, because in the comics, Hela is an absolute monster. She is hellish to deal with. Hyperion, the only paywall character that you should not invest in. Hyperion is one of the worst characters in the Universal class, and that is putting him up against some pretty difficult competition, but it's fair because he is a Universal. He does have a very appealing 3rd skill that heals him for 20%, which is fantastic, with no recovery rate or very little recovery rate, as I have about 0%. So with flat recovery rate, he recovers about 4,400 HP for me, which is pretty good. And then he's got a pretty decent 5th skill with a stun and with some large AoE kind of heat vision laser eyes. And he's got a good leadership. His tier 2 passive is really not that great. His 4-star passive, also really not that great. 4% ignore defense is an absolute joke. The 30% debuff is actually pretty good, but that's where it ends. His 4th skill, 1st skill, and 2nd skill are all quite terrible. No full iframes, only partial iframes, not enough damage, too slow. His animations are janky, they're just awkward, they just don't fit the character, they're too meandering and kind of paced. He needs a lot of help. He probably needs to spend a weekend at Elektra's dojo to come back and really represent what a paywall character should be, like Carnage, Kid Kaiju, etc. He definitely needs a lot of tweaks to his skills, iframes, speed, enhancement, stuff like that. Singularity, on the other hand, I think is actually a pretty good character. She's quite weak at tier 1 because she can't take a hit, but she has a massive tier 2 bonus, which definitely does bring her back into the conversation for an above average character. 40% in guaranteed dodge. She pierces with barrier effects, which is nice for taking down shielded characters like Loki, even Odin with his shield, and others like Silk. And then she gets 40% and 30% bonus and skill damage. So she becomes quite formidable at tier 2. She's got CC, she's got iframes, she's got immunity to both paralyze and stun, so she's quite flexible and she's quite threatening in PvP. I think she's decent for the fact that she's an A-Force, daily bio selector only character. Next up, we have Angela. Angela is basically a totally different character with and without her uniform. Without her uniform, she's like a 1 out of 10 dumpster level. With her uniform, she's about a 3 or 4 out of 10, still below average because of the survivability. However, her damage spikes to the moon. She does massive damage, especially when coupled with the right fire leadership, a good fire obelisk. It is insane. She pumps out damage to compete with native tier 2 characters. However, even with 25% guaranteed dodge, it's not enough. Her Asgardian Blood passive does synergize very well and allow her to not get stunned or debuffed or interrupted when she's dealing damage. And the extra damage that she gets, the guaranteed crit rate, etc. is great, but she just dies too quickly. She needs a guard, she needs immunity, she needs iframes. and she needs more of them, because right now she only has partials, and it doesn't help her stay alive much longer than she was before her tier 2. Vision, on the other hand, is kind of the opposite of Angela. He's got tons of iframes and immunity and ways to survive, but he just doesn't have enough damage. Even with the tweaks, he still doesn't do enough. You know, 25% and 20% just doesn't cut it. They could double those numbers and Vision still wouldn't be an OP character, but he kind of should be because he's Vision. So I think they should definitely bump up his damage to really represent the character successfully. Loki, old meta character back in the days of Hulkbuster and Silk. Still a solid pick, not really needing his tier 2 to be good because he just gets it done with the 5th and the 3rd, but a decent character overall, really not much to change without, you know, totally changing his kit and the way the character plays. The only thing you could really do for Loki is just up the damage, up the damage, up the damage, but then it breaks to a certain point and he becomes overpowered again. Someone who's not overpowered, my boy Tin Can, the Tin Man from Wizard of Oz, Ultron. Top to bottom, 1 skill to 5 skill, bad. Needs help, not enough damage, no iframes, nothing special, no stuns, no special effects. His minions only have 40% of his stats, which is paltry. His tier 2 passive does not do enough at all. He is just weak sauce, all on top of your burger, fries, and hot dog. He needs a massive rework on the scale of like Captain America and Black Panther and Black Widow combined. He needs an epic rework to be an epic character again, because he's Ultron, and if, you know, Netmarble hasn't really read the comics, Ultron's kind of a big deal, you know, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, he's kind of one of 2 main villains, so I mean, they get it, we just gotta wait for Netmarble to get it. Ghost Rider, on the other hand, does have good damage, especially with his tier 2 against super villains, 120%, he's got that Miles Morales feel to him. He also has the very solid passive of being immune to fire damage, which makes him always relevant against Dormammu and Jean Grey now, and also others, but more importantly those 2. So I think he's always going to have a place. I just think he could use a few skill tweaks because some of his skills are a bit awkward. They take a long time to animate, they don't do enough damage, they just leave him out in the open with his long cloak swinging in the wind, and he definitely needs his new uniform to have any semblance of survivability because of Getaway Car's immunity. Without the new uniform, he needs help. Clea, great damage like Ghost Rider, but really lacking in the survivability. A very frail character, especially for a universal. Very low defense, very low HP. She does have a shield with her 3rd skill, Mystic Shuffle, but as you can see, even at level 6, it's 2 hits for 2 seconds. It takes about a second to cast this skill, so you basically have 2 hits for 1 second, and especially with the likes of characters now like Dormammu, Doctor Strange, Jean Grey, who hit so many times with each skill, this shield comes off in less than a second, and you actually end up taking damage midway through casting Mystic Shuffle. So this definitely needs to be doubled, if not quadrupled or even tripled, to be of any meaning to her. But even with that small change, she would turn into a very formidable character because she has so much damage to roll out from her own skills and from her summons. Jane Foster, on the other hand, has survivability. You know, she has the guaranteed dodge, she has the damage 60%. She just doesn't do anything great. She's an okay character. She just doesn't shine in any category. You know, the problem I think is that a lot of her skills take a long time to animate, and it's kind of the same problem that Wong has and a couple of other characters. There's good damage there. It's just that it takes like 5 or 6 seconds for the damage to complete. So the DPS per second, the damage that you're outputting, just drops off a cliff. They need to give her some skill reworks to change around some of the animations and really encapsulate some more of the power, because she's a bit too flighty and a bit too kind of whimsical. They need to really capture the power of the person holding Mjolnir to make her feel a little bit more impactful, you know? Sheer damage is not that much worse than Thor's, for example, but Thor feels like the God of Thunder when you're handling him. He's also weak in terms of survivability, but at least he hits like a truck. She hits like, you know, a paint truck, a kid's truck, something like that. So they need to change that a little bit. Robbie Reyes, great character, not much to change. Same thing goes for Dormammu, Odin, Ebony, Supergiant, Thanos, Corvus, Black Dwarf. Yes, Black Dwarf is fine. Quote me on that. Proxima, Black Bolt. Carol could use a little bit of damage, but I think it's curious, or I think it's nice to leave her that way and allow the player base to develop her as an offensive threat, given that she has such a defensive set with Binary Explosion and her tier 2 passive giving her basically instant or infinite immunity. So I think it's nice that they under-leveled or under-tweaked her damage so that make you make up for that with your obelisk and stuff like that, and have to develop the character yourself instead of having everything given to you. Destroyer, very niche character, but he works. Same thing with Hellstorm. Let's go back now and address the last 3 characters on this list. My boy Ronin. You guys know I've had a big stiffy for Ronin since the beginning, still do, but I gotta say, he's got the survivability in spades. He's got the CC, the crowd control. He's got the interruptions. What he doesn't have is the damage. He has one of the lowest damage outputs I've ever seen from a tier 2 character. He does less damage in a full rotation of his skills than Doctor Strange does with some of his auto attacks if they crit. Think about that for a second. Doctor Strange does more damage with one skill on a non-crit than Ronin does with all of his skills with crits. And, you know, my Ronin is not totally maxed out, but he's pretty close. He's got a legendary uniform. He's got some mostly defensive, but he's got the Urus to match. Okay, I didn't mess around with my Ronin. He's not poorly built. You know, he's rank 14. But believe me, he needs damage. They could double, triple, quadruple his damage and it still wouldn't be enough to put him in the conversation with the likes of other characters that he should be in the conversation with. So I think he sorely needs a damage bump, and that's basically all he needs. The last 2, Satana, I also do think that she needs a damage buff. I haven't had as much time to play with Satana as I have with Ronin, but my initial feelings when I got the character at 6 stars, and still my feelings to this day having her at tier 2, are that she has a lot of nice animations and she has some good dot damage. She has some good kind of creativity with little minion and the debuff and the immunity and the bind and the iframe on the first skill, actually, I believe, Dancing Flame, or actually it's her second skill, Flamethrower. And of course, I can't ignore the 10 seconds of immunity at tier 2. However, to give up, you know, to get that, she had to give up a lot of damage. So I think just a tiny damage bump, maybe 10-15%, would be really nice, especially if they put it on her tier 2 passive and they made it, you know, on a cooldown. It doesn't have to be up all the time, it's fine. But I think if they added in there a skill and bonus damage for her, it would really be phenomenal. The last one, Thor, definitely does not need the damage as we've discussed, but does need survivability. And much like Clea, he has a guard hit, it just doesn't last long enough. You know, 8 hits for 4 seconds is very situational. There are certain, you know, instances where you do need a lot of hits in a hurry if you're going to get bursted down by someone like Doctor Strange in his second skill. But in most other situations, you're taking damage consistently and you're taking damage in intervals. So that 4 seconds on a 13-second cooldown means that you're still going to be vulnerable for about 3 seconds with no guard whatsoever, no iframes, almost no way of protecting yourself. So they could just bump this up to 8 seconds so that it matches guys like Magneto, Silk, Loki, or they could give Thor another way of mitigating the damage, a heal, perhaps an iframe, and I think that would be enough. He doesn't need a lot, but he just needs a little something in his bun. Some of this in a bun. So let me know what you guys think of the Universal class and my outlook on them. I think that about half, if not more than half, of the characters on this list are perfect as they are, or, you know, almost perfect. They don't need any tweaks or any rebalancing, any buffing, but I may be wrong in that assessment. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know how you see the Universal class. And of course, guys, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.